In a world long before memory, before stories or language, life spoke through instinct, courage, and the silent wisdom of nature. The Healing Mirror invites you to step back into that forgotten age where every heartbeat carried a lesson. Every creature struggled not just to survive, but to understand its place in the grand design. Today, we journey millions of years into the past, where an early human Homo Habilis meets a powerful and protective giant prehistoric mother fox. In their confrontation lies a truth that still guides us today. Fear is ancient, but compassion is eternal. The first light of dawn crawled slowly across the ancient plains, touching the tall golden grasses that swayed like waves frozen in time. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth, carrying the distant calls of unseen creatures awakening to a world shaped by raw instinct and survival. Caro, a young Homo habilis barely stepping into the early responsibilities of a hunter, rose from the shallow depression where he had slept. His tribe was hungry, and the responsibility pressed upon his chest with a weight far greater than the crude stone tool he carried. His hands were still small, his muscles not yet hardened by experience, but his heart burned with the desire to prove himself. Hunger had been tightening its grip on the tribe for days. The rains had driven much of the game deeper into the forests or scattered them across the plains. Caro had volunteered to venture farther than the others dared, hoping to find anything that might feed the children crying in the night. The world around him was silent in an eerie, expectant way. The grass brushed his knees as he walked, the horizon stretching endlessly with rolling hills and scattered acacia trees. Each step he took reminded him that he was alone. Yet there was a strange thrill in the isolation, a primal awareness that sharpened his senses. He stopped often, crouching to examine tracks, sniffing the air like the hunters he idolized. Most of the tracks he found were old or belonged to animals far too dangerous for someone of his size and skills. But one set of tracks caught his eye, fresh, distinct, and promising. The prints were larger than the foxes he had seen before, spaced in a pattern that suggested a creature moving with a mix of caution and confidence. Something in Caro stirred. Perhaps fate had left these tracks for him. He followed them deeper into the plains, the wind brushing against his face, carrying hints of musk and wild fur. His heart beat faster. He imagined returning to the tribe with a small carcass dragged behind him, the admiration of the elders warming him more than any fire. The tracks led him toward a cluster of boulders jutting from the earth like ancient guardians. As he approached, he crouched low, gripping his stone tool tighter. His breathing slowed. The world seemed to shrink to the soft dirt beneath his feet and the shadows ahead. Then he saw her. A massive prehistoric mother fox emerged from the shade of the rocks, far larger than the foxes he knew. Her body thick with muscle, her legs powerful, her fur a vibrant reddish gold that shimmered under the rising sun. Her face was sharp, eyes narrow and alert, ears angled toward him. Even from a distance, Caro could feel the intensity of her presence. She stood not just as an animal, but as a guardian of something precious. Behind her, nestled in a shallow den carved naturally into the earth, were two tiny cubs no larger than Caro's forearm. Their squeaks were soft, fragile, and helpless. Caro froze. The mother fox bristled, her tail rising like a flaming banner. She lowered her head, not in submission, but in a silent primal warning. Caro felt a tremor run through him. He knew that an animal defending its young was far more dangerous than one defending itself. Yet his hunger clouded his logic. The fox was large, yes, but she was alone. He had a weapon. His tribe needed food. He took a step forward. The fox growled, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground. Her eyes locked with his, wild and ancient, carrying a message that required no language. Caro hesitated, his grip tightening, the stone digging into his palm. He had faced smaller predators before, but never a creature that stared into him as though it could see every fear, every doubt, every hope inside him. He raised his arm slightly, preparing to strike if she lunged. But something stopped him, an instinct older than his species, a flicker of understanding born not from thought, but from the shared rhythm of life itself. He saw the way she positioned her body, shielding her cubs. The way her muscles trembled not with aggression but with a fierce love. She was not hunting him. She had not stalked him. She simply stood between danger and her offspring, exactly as his own mother would have done. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the cubs, small, warm, vulnerable. Karo suddenly remembered the newest child in his tribe, a baby who had survived only because the adults worked together to protect it from predators and cold nights. He remembered watching his mother curl around his younger sibling during storms, arms wrapped tight, eyes wide and sleepless. He remembered feeling safe under that protective embrace. Now, looking at the fox, he recognized the same instinct. The realization softened him. The stone tool in his hand felt heavy, not with purpose, but with conflict. The fox sensed the change in his posture. Her growl faded into a low, guarded rumble. Her ears twitched, assessing him anew. The cubs let out tiny chirps, unaware of the fragile balance between life and death unfolding at the mouth of their den. Karo lowered his arm slightly, not yet fully convinced but no longer ruled by raw hunger. He took another careful step, not forward, but sideways, creating space between himself and the den. The fox tracked every movement with razor-sharp focus. Her muscles remained coiled, ready to spring, but something in her gaze shifted too. She no longer saw him as an immediate threat, but as a creature caught between need and understanding. He paused again, his breath slow and deliberate. His thoughts wandered to the stories the elders told him, stories of how the world was shaped not only by hunters and prey, but by moments of unexpected harmony. Perhaps this was one of those moments. Perhaps the plains had brought them together not for battle, but for recognition. For a single heartbeat, the world hushed completely. No wind, no insects, no distant calls. Only Karo and the fox, two beings separated by species but united by something deeper. He felt the weight of choice pressing upon him, heavier than hunger, heavier than fear. And in that silence, he began to understand the lesson life had brought him to learn. Night swept across the ancient plains like a slow-moving tide, swallowing the last traces of sunlight beneath a curtain of gray storm clouds. The air had changed thick, electric, and trembling with the promise of rain. Karo had been traveling for hours, trying to retrace the path back to his tribe, but the storm had thrown the world into confusion. Landmarks he relied on were blurred by mist, sounds distorted by the growing roar of wind. His legs ached, his lips were dry, and the weight of isolation pressed on him like a stone. He was not afraid of the dark itself, but what lived in it: prowling shadows, hungry jaws, and the creeping realization that nature cared little for the fate of a lone early human wandering too far from safety. Cold droplets began to fall, at first soft, then rapidly turning into sheets of icy rain that stung his skin. Karo ducked his head and hurried toward the hills rising in the distance. He needed shelter. The storm was no ordinary one. Thunder cracked through the air like the rage of ancient spirits, and lightning split the sky in jagged white scars. The plains, once open and golden beneath the sun, were now a treacherous, shivering sea. He reached the base of a rocky outcrop just as the rain intensified. Water streamed down the stone surfaces, carving fresh paths through the earth. Karo searched desperately along the rock face, hoping for a hollow or cave to escape the storm. His heart pounded with urgency. If he did not find cover soon, the cold would sap his strength, and predators seeking refuge might find him weak and vulnerable. At last, he spotted a narrow opening tucked between two large boulders. He squeezed through, ducking low, and stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning leaking through the entrance. The ground was uneven but dry, a welcome relief from the relentless rain outside. Karo exhaled shakily, his body trembling as the storm continued to rage beyond the cave walls. Then he heard a soft, rhythmic breathing. Not human, familiar. He froze, eyes adjusting, and saw a shape curled near the deeper wall of the cave, a shape with reddish-gold fur. His heart jolted. It was her, the giant prehistoric mother fox he had encountered days earlier, the same one who had stood against him with unwavering strength to protect her cubs. And beside her, tucked close against her warm belly, were the two tiny cubs he had seen before. For a moment, neither moved. The only sounds were the wind shrieking outside and the quickening beat of Karo's heart. The mother fox rose slightly, her muscles tense, her ears angled toward him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, sharp and assessing. Karo's fingers instinctively twitched toward the stone tool at his waist, but he stopped himself. He remembered the moment on the plains, the warning, the understanding, the silent truth they had shared without a single word spoken. He slowly lowered himself into a crouch, not daring to make any sudden movements. The fox did not growl, but her gaze remained locked on him. She was exhausted, he could see it in the droop of her shoulders, the way she curled protectively around her cubs, shielding them from the cold draft entering the cave. Even a creature as powerful as she needed shelter from a storm like this. Karo understood. She wasn't here to challenge him. She was here for the same reason he was: survival. The wind howled outside, cold enough to make the cave walls tremble. A blast of icy air swept in, causing the cubs to whimper softly. The mother fox lowered her head to nuzzle them, offering what warmth she could. Karo felt an ache in his chest at the sight. The fox wasn't just strong, she was burdened, responsible, tired. He knew those feelings well. His tribe depended on him too, even if he was still young. He knew what it meant to carry the weight of others. He reached into the small woven pouch tied to his side and pulled out a few dry sticks he had gathered earlier before the storm began. They were precious. Fire meant warmth, protection, life. He hesitated. Sharing fire was not a small thing. But neither was the realization that in this moment, the creatures beside him were not threats. They were companions bound by the same struggle. He carefully stacked the sticks near the cave's entrance where the draft would help the flames breathe. He struck his stone tool against another piece of quartz he kept for sparks. It took several attempts, his hands were shaking, and the stones were damp, but at last a spark caught. A tiny ember glowed, then grew, spreading along the dry wood until a small flame flickered to life. Warmth began to spill across the cave. The fox's ears twitched at the sudden light. She didn't approach, but her posture eased slightly. The cubs stirred, their tiny noses lifting as they sensed the shift in temperature. Karo held his hands near the fire, absorbing its heat, feeling life return to his stiff fingers. The crackling of flames mingled with the low rumble of thunder outside, creating a strange, almost comforting harmony. Minutes passed quietly. The fox watched him with a new kind of caution, no longer purely defensive, but contemplative, as though evaluating this strange creature who created warmth from stone and wood. Karo glanced at her, and in that shared gaze, something wordless passed between them again. A mutual recognition of vulnerability, a quiet truce. The storm grew harsher outside, rain pounding like fists against the earth. Lightning flashed, filling the cave with a stark white glow. Instinctively, the cubs flinched and pressed closer to their mother. She wrapped her tail around them, her body shivering from cold and stress. Karo felt a tug of empathy. He remembered long nights when his tribe huddled around a fire, protecting the youngest from cold winds and prowling beasts. He pushed another stick into the fire, feeding it carefully. The flames grew brighter, warmer, reaching farther across the cave floor. The fox's breathing steadied. Karo noticed her eyes soften, just a little. Time passed slowly, measured by the rhythm of rainfall and fire. Karo eventually shifted to sit with his back against the cave wall, watching the fire dance. The fox lay several paces away, her gaze drifting between him and her cubs. In the flickering light, Karo studied her closely, the weariness in her movements, the instinctive devotion in the way she guarded her young even while exhausted. She was a predator, yes, but also a parent, and in that, they were the same. Outside, the world continued its chaotic symphony. But inside the cave, a fragile peace took root. Karo felt his own fear ebb away. The storm had pushed them together, but it was something deeper that kept them from seeing each other as enemies. They were survivors. They were caretakers. They were travelers in the same harsh, unforgiving world. And for one long night, their paths had converged not through conflict, but through necessity, understanding, and the quiet realization that even the wildest creatures shared a heartbeat with him. As the fire crackled softly, the fox lowered her head and closed her eyes, trusting for the first time in their encounter that he would not bring harm. Kara watched the cubs nestle safely against her warm fur, and a strange calm settled over him. The storm outside raged on, but within the cave, the barriers between early human and beast slowly faded, replaced by an unspoken connection born in the heart of a world far older than either of them.